Hey, what's up, guys? Today I'm going to be talking about a practical workflow for world building. So we're going to start it with blocking in a very rough map, and then we're going to jump into Incarnate, which is a web-based map making tool. They do have a subscription, but I'm going to be using the free version, and you guys can see what basically what the tools we have available that you can pay outright, so you don't have to do subscription. But I just wanted to kind of get in and with Incarnate, I kind of get this done kind of quickly because I had already spent 5 hours for this. That's why you're kind of seeing a time lapse. All right. So one of the cool thing that helped me out when I was doing the map making just before it even is for me to kind of have a plan in mind. For example, let's talk about the terrain. All right. So I had this tundra that I was thinking about, which was like thinking like in Colorado, like getting images from that, and then using references from like tundras in Russia, and then that like made me want to make an area of terrain that had tons of mountains, and then that's kind of like where I started getting the concept of making this map like this. But if you do get like a bunch of images, where that's like you're gonna do a swamp, a desert, it won't matter in the end, but it will help you visualize in your head kind of what you want to do, and certain details that are maybe in the image you might want to incorporate into your map, and it'll make it more interesting or maybe more realistic. Now let's say you decided to make an area it's not like even human, like it's like some place in outer space or some kind of fantasy, like that's Dungeons and Dragons, like it's totally not human. If you can anchor that, either that sense of fantasy or sci-fi with like a sense of realism, you will make your people who are your audience, that environment more believable. So like you can stray away from reality, but don't be so out there that it becomes like people can't even imagine it, and that's for everything. I'm not trying to tell people how to write, because that's not my goal here, but it's just one of those things. Even in art, it's like that. People take a bunch of things that are compiling and that are weird, and they'll make something new out of it. So now I want to talk about world builder's disease, which is when somebody spends way too much time world building. I want to make sure you guys are very cognizant of it. Make sure you're pushing your story forward while you're doing your world building, because it can get very easy to be constantly building this very very powerful, very rich lore world, but your story is never getting done. You're just never writing any, you're like a beginning, middle, and end to your characters, arcs and things like that. There's no arc to your characters, so make sure that that's getting done along with your story, because if you don't do that, you're basically never going to finish the story. Scale is a very big deal when it comes to world building, and it could be like a good example would be like George R. R. Martin's The Wall or something like that he did, but that's just a structure, but like that just shows like how massive something you can make, or the throne room that he had in King's Landing. Basically, it was supposed to be way more absurd than what we saw in the TV series, but that's part of world building, and that isn't just like something like that. Like we're talking, how big your world actually is. How, like, let's say if your characters are in a city, how long would it take them to traverse your world and go to the next town? The reason I say that scale is such a big deal is because for me, I was arbitrarily just doing it for my world building. I'm going to have my characters go to a totally different country, and they are in medieval times, which means they're either going by carriage, or they're either walking, or by horse, or by boat. Those are the only 4 options you have. The rate in which you're going to travel becomes a big deal, because are they going to go to different towns? What's the rate they have to go to get somewhere? Do they have some kind of time crunch? Like I don't know, is a bomb gonna go off if they can only travel about where? Like for me, I'm in like my theme is medieval times, so that's like 40 miles in a day you're traveling, whether it's by horse or carriage or by foot. So if they have to be in a entirely different country within 2 days, they're gonna fail whatever mission they're gonna do. Because I was gonna have my characters, they're going to meet up with another character that is basically going to be in a kind of an event scenario. So he's going to be using like a boat and they're going to go by foot. So I'm like, how far is he and how far are they? Okay, they like how long would it take to really traverse both of them? And then you got to kind of figure it out on a map, which we're creating right now. So that made it kind of cool for me to figure that out. A really cool thing that happened to me while I was making this map, I accidentally came up with some ideas for an area just because I was doing world building. So I was thinking, where are these people getting their food from? So then I'm like, okay, well, they probably have to have some kind of farmers. So I'm like, I might as well create some farms here. And then I started thinking, well, what are these people like? Then that came up with like, oh, maybe they're kind of closed off to outsiders. And then I'm like, maybe they have some kind of like the kind of cultish kind of scenario. And then if the characters go there, they're gonna not. There might be some kind of conflict I can have them kind of interact with. So this is what I mean, like you can get some really cool things happening just because, like world building's helping me out in a way because my characters, like I hadn't written anything for when they have to travel from one side of the country to the other. Like I couldn't think of anything really. I was just gonna have like a character development moment, but I didn't have anything in mind. Me thinking up like different little cities and then having to create little backstories on each one of them, it basically drives the story forward so you can get to know your characters in a way that's not something that like they're just traveling arbitrarily. Basically things are happening in the world around them, and then the world's conflicts that they make and how they interact with it, you'll get to know them through that. And that's a great way world building is going to work for you. One thing I noticed when I was making a new region, like an entirely different country, because I made another map outside of this, and maybe we'll discuss different countries later. Since countries are usually named after people who either discovered them or conquered them, you end up with a conflict that's around the person who either discovered it or who conquered the country. Because whether or not they pass the country down to the next person, there's going to be conflicts that might have happened because of what the events that transpired. For example, if they conquer the country, maybe who do they conquer it from? What happened to those people? Or if they're planning a coup, if they discovered it, what's the environment like? From that alone, you'll get some free plot points just from the naming a country or region after someone's name. Now, one thing I want to talk about for certain is when you're writing characters that are not necessarily essential to the plot, but you want them to have some kind of weight to the story, you can write them. So it's going to come down to, do we have time to make these characters very fleshed out or not? But if you want the interaction with your characters to really stand out, you're going to need to build a lore around that particular character, that even though he's not someone who is going to be around your characters and around the story a whole lot. But you can still world build around them. You can still figure out who their family is, how they impact the story, what's their world like. Like it'll at least if they ask something of the character, when they come in to interact with the character, they will seem more three-dimensional. In the end, I'm not saying every interaction should be memorable, but if you can make even some interactions memorable with characters that are not the main characters, you've done already a deal of good writing. If non-main characters can be likable along with the main characters, for certain you'll be creating good immersion to your story. In the end of the day, people want to have a good time, and the more immersed they are, the more they buy into your world, the more they're going to enjoy the content you're putting out. Alright guys, so I'm going to be putting up another video soon, and it won't be the same thing. It will be me doing working on one of the characters, and I hope I catch you guys next time.